Good morning, sir.
Morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's been some weeks.
Yeah, that's right. What's the latest?
Well, I mean, the last 2 years have been difficult, I guess, for you as well as a gym owner.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Maybe we can dive a little bit deeper into it later on. But
Okay.
yeah, other than that, it was an interesting time because we had a lot of time to reflect on stuff and gym being closed. But yeah, so far we're doing good. How are you?
All good. Yeah. Just kind of feels like a blur, you know? When
Mm-hmm.
people make reference to something in the past, maybe 3, 4 years ago, I always delete the 2 years in my mind of pandemic. So it just seems like, I don't know, time is increasing in speed.
How do you feel about it? Because I mean, it's been roughly 2 years that whole pandemic stuff going on, and for me, it's like that was kind of yesterday, but it was already 10 years ago. So
Totally.
those 2 years, I mean, obviously we spent more time at home with the family and stuff, and I mean, I kept myself busy through some online stuff we did for the gym. But it's almost like a blackout. It's 2 years are gone, and I don't know where the time went. How about you?
Totally. Yeah, that's totally it. I think there's probably, you know, each individual person has their own experience, but I think there was like two main distinct experiences. One was this like idle time for people where because of their work or how their life was structured, it was very freeing, like a lot of free time, a lot of downtime, a lot of time to reflect and explore new things, etc. And then the other experience was it was an absolute fist fight every day, all day. You've never worked more in your life. And so I think I was in the latter of the those two camps for most of
Hmm.
the time. So yeah, it felt very I don't know, reflecting back, you don't really know what you're experiencing when it's consuming you, but pretty like traumatic, I think. And then um very like a reactionary, as I remember the main feeling. It's like you're sort of having to respond to. I felt like I was living by like news on Twitter, you
Hmm.
know? I was like, okay, when am I gonna get the announcement that like everything we just built it doesn't work anymore? You know? It's like this announcement based life.
Yeah, so I had the feeling that I mean I got self-employed specifically to avoid situations like this. So I'm forced to do stuff that I thought I could do whatever I want and nobody can stop me. And all of a
Hmm.
sudden we were in a situation was like, wait, there's still somebody who could tell me what to do and close my doors. It's like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of came in a situation where I never wanted to be in. Obviously, nobody wanted to be in that situation.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I mean, at least in Austria and Europe, we didn't like know exactly where it was going. Like we were closed, and then could reopen. We could train outdoors, and then we were fully closed, and we go back to the gym, and then back to being fully closed. So like no plan, no strategy whatsoever, which drove me nuts. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, nobody knew in the beginning what was happening, but yeah, that was kind of a weird situation for all of us, I guess.
Yeah. Um, but I think there's a lot of positivity in it, right? You sort of see like, given the circumstances, I feel that the, the private sector really demonstrated our willingness to innovate, and willingness to adapt, which you sort of, I mean, I'll speak from my experience. In the back of my mind, I hoped that I was building an organization that would step up and thrive in times of negative external stimulus.
Hmm.
And it's been pretty chill. It's been pretty easy so far, right? And so we haven't really had a consequential test. I mean, sure, the business has it all the time in ways that I'm probably not acknowledging, but this felt like in a weird masochistic way, like, okay, let's see what's up,
So how did you?
So
I mean, I saw you set up a an online training program the Delta Bravo, right?
Yeah.
So how did that
Yeah.
evolve? Was it out of necessity, I guess, because the gym was closed?
A bit, yeah. I mean, I can't say that it had nothing to do with the pandemic. Surely it was driven by the pandemic. I think to take even like one step back from Delta Bravo, the course that we created, I think if I armchair quarterback the pandemic, I think the thing that helped us stand apart, at least locally or regionally, was this like offensive approach, meaning I think that the people who fared the worst in the pandemic were sort of playing defense and reacting and sort of sitting back to observe what will happen.
Hmm.
And we sort of made a dramatic choice to like step towards this dramatically, meaning before the closures of businesses were forced, we decided to shut down ahead of time and just announce very clearly how's it going to be, what's it going to be, what can
Hmm.
you expect, here's what we're doing. And I think that people really respond well to clarity and decisive decision making. Um, and that started with just messaging like and communication early on about what we were going to do. And then of course thereafter there were the forced closures and the things that happened, of course. But the way that I sort of viewed that time was a pretty absolutist, you know, everybody's talking about like stoicism, but like borderline stoic view, which is like, okay, if the playing field was, uh, this big before, my arms are outstretched, and now it's this big, right? Meaning like, a 2 by 2 inch square that you can play in, right? Well, why is it so small? It's small because all gyms are closed. Not everybody has access to all the things. You don't have all the tools, et cetera, et cetera. How do you win inside of this new set of constraints? And when you sort of relinquish your feelings about why the constraints are so small and what the constraints are, you can just send it on the things that are inside your control. And so that logic led us to Delta Bravo, which was sort of like, okay, we're going to make a lot of concessions about what we know about training, like a ton.
Hmm.
But we do have some new things that are available to us, like one of our biggest constraints, actually, just if I kind of pull the curtain back with training in our GPP program at Deuce is we don't have perfect compliance, and we acknowledge that, meaning we don't know when and where to expect our students to show up, partly because we sell people memberships that say you can only come here 2 or 3 days a week. So it's a bit misguided to write a very controlled, specific, call it linear based program when we know that there's low compliance on
Hmm.
purpose to
Hmm.
this training. However, when you lock the entire planet in their house, we can sell you something that changes the assumptions about compliance.
Hmm.
Like we're going to say, well, what we're going to give up is this access to a gym and the program that you knew before, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, if you're in a phone booth and I know you're going to be in that phone booth 7 days a week, I can write you something that'll make you definitely specifically better. And I couldn't have said that a month ago,
Yeah, and
And so, yeah, that was it. That's how we got there.
yeah, and you probably won't have much to do at home rather than sitting in home office and having some Zoom calls and that's it. So
Totally.
I really like that paradigm shift during the pandemic. I mean, liked kind of dealing with the situation that so my members. So we started the project with literally training with 2 sandbags and a peg stick at home. Built up a sandbag production so we could deliver to our members. So I realized that most of my members trained more than when they were actually coming to the gym, which is weird,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you
Mm-hmm.
kind of take that location away, you kind of take that luxury of going to gym, which is not 24/7 open, but most of the time open. And all of a sudden you're responsible, you're self-responsible. We set up a buddy system so you could meet outdoors with like 20 meters apart training. So people had to actually get more involved into training, which is weird because those are my members and they were involved in training, but on a different level, if you know what I mean.
Oh, for sure.
So that was a really like it was a cool experience on that level, and I think it helped a lot of people just to keep at least keep doing something physically, right?
For sure. For sure. And I think that like I don't want to make judgment about what other folks were starting to do, and like there's like the Zoom classes and trying to like hold on to what an in-class experience was like. I think that part of the power and whatever value it is that we created, I mean, objectively, we created a lot of value. The company grew in a time when it shouldn't have grown. Um, but I think that if I can speak into part of the power of that value add is as much in what we created as it is in what we completely gave up. Like we completely gave up on some of the things that are like a hallmark of training in the gym, like being in a class that starts at a certain time and we didn't even try that. This is not a thing that is available to you anymore. But what we were able to gain is like, it wasn't just a time of maintenance, like, hey, we're going to like bunker down and somehow get to the other end. It's like, you're going to PR in an environment that you seemingly would assume is impossible to do so. And like the reason why we're going to do that is because X, Y, and Z. And I mean, I don't know if I can say this honestly without including the fact that fear was a big part of that. If we didn't make this the singular, coolest, most important choice that they could make, then we're going to lose everybody. And so we just really had to buy into this thing that I'm talking about, and it really worked out in hindsight.
Maybe I should have said that in the beginning. So the purpose of those conversations is to have good long conversations about gym stuff, about training, because I feel that everybody is like taking 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 30 seconds to explain everything. So I love talking to people. I love talking to gym owners. I love talking to coaches, and just maybe get also some controversial views on my opinion. So feel free to say whatever you want. Nobody's gonna listen anyways. It's a very small podcast, so don't worry about it. I just want to pick people's brains, right? And we've met a couple of times in your gym, in the most beautiful and biggest gym in the world, which is it's a cool setting.
Thank you.
I think you came to Vienna once, right, for a workshop, for the strongman workshop.
Yeah, that's right.
Which was nice. So let's start off very generally. What's your current take on like the pandemic is more or less, it's not over, but it's like in more or less in the aftermath. What's the next step from your view for the fitness industry? What's the next thing coming? What's coming for Deuce Gym? What's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I think that anyone who's listening to this right now, who's heard me on any other podcast, is probably wondering how I'm going to fit the square peg into the round hole of what I always end up talking about. And red flag, here it comes. What I'm going to do is advocate what I always advocate for, which is an acknowledgement of evolution, or when I say evolution, progress, growth, as a process of not only transcendence, like, or change, but inclusion of that which served you before. And so I think the easiest, let me be a little more controversial, dumbest way to look at this is an either or scenario, right? Is it we're all in the gym again? Is that the answer? Or is it that we are, no one's coming back to the gym and we're all in our garages training digitally? And I think that I'd like to transcend what fitness looked like in 2018, but include some of that and acknowledge that the landscape is changing. And I think that the winners in the future will be able to communicate clearly their value in the world in a way that participates in the complexity of a world where there will be this connection to a specific place where people gather to train,
Hmm.
and that many participants in the bell curve of the training population have past experiences that set them up for a lot of success in a more decentralized training way,
Hmm.
right? All of the people who have had quality experiences in gyms like yours and gyms like mine haven't forgotten the utility of quote unquote functional training or best practices in a training environment. And maybe for some of them, the need to be told how to warm up and where to put their feet is less important and less valuable to them to the tune of a couple $100s a month.
Hmm.
So I think the future winners will be able to hold space for, let's say, both types of movers.
Hmm. Um, so I have a bit of a controversial view on that stuff because, like, if you see the history of fitness and how bodybuilding evolved and like gyms, global gyms evolved, etc., it seems like then CrossFit came in and boutique gyms, however you want to call them, strength and conditioning, powerlifting came in. What's your opinion on it? So what I see is there's a lot of gyms doing great work out there, where people feel attracted to the vibe of the gym, right? So want to join gym X, Y, and Z because it's a cool vibe. They have a great brand. It's literally like it's awesome to train there. And I think the next step, at least for me, is people should feel like their own individuality in that gym, because now it's a lot of, okay, I joined a whatever it's the CrossFit gym or gym X, Y, and Z, and I kind of give up my personality and I'm just gonna fully immerse in that community, in that tribe, and be like, okay, I'm gonna dress like those other people and I'm gonna train what's on the program and forget about, okay, what are my individual needs. Which is cool because you need that pulling effect of, okay, there's a cool tribe and I want to follow them, but at some point you got to step back and think about, okay, but is like that program and on that day is that the best program for me? And it doesn't mean I shouldn't train in that gym, but I mean it's like I think people will more and more, what do you want to call it, decentralized or individually experience, like, okay, this is what I need that day. And it doesn't mean change the program, it's just the way I approach the programming. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your
Oh,
thoughts on that?
100%. I think it's a great point. Kenneth Cole, do you know this brand? It's a clothing brand, Kenneth Cole. I think it's an American focused thing, but it started as a shoe company, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that they do clothing now as well. But anyway, the reason why I referenced that is the man himself, the founder, his name is, of course, Kenneth Cole, was saying in an interview, and I was very surprised by his answer. And it's basically reflecting what you're saying right now, which is an acknowledgement of this era of pop culture is one that is embracing a consciousness of the individual brand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is acknowledging the transition that you observed and I've observed as well. Um, so I'll just get the Kenneth Cole part out of the way. He was asked, what is the future of Kenneth Cole? And he said, well, the future of Kenneth Cole acknowledges that people don't buy brands anymore because people perceive that they are their own brand. And
Mm-hmm.
so the future of Kenneth Cole will need to take on a mindset that can co-brand with our consumers, meaning that people will buy our shoes and clothes because they perceive that it will support their personal brand, which
Mm-hmm.
is sort of going back in time, the opposite of like, I will buy the Michael Jordan shoes because I want to be like Michael Jordan. Now people want to be like themselves. And so the brands and products and services that they buy all need to support that projection. And I think that what we're seeing in fitness may reflect that. And that's sort of what you're saying right now, which is like, how many people are willing to be the socialized CrossFitter, right? Where they're the obvious archetype, wearing the clothes, saying the things, saluting the flag, drinking the Kool-Aid, etc. And that sort of speaks towards this perception that people need an individualized program, and maybe that is where this all goes. The one curveball that I would throw into that is training is hard. And I think that, and this may sound pessimistic, but the largest bell curve portion of the population, in my opinion, has not demonstrated and probably will not demonstrate the ability to be compliant on their own to difficult training indefinitely. And that's why, and I'll go back and explain my view of what you just said, which is I sort of see it as like waves of fitness, right? So the golden era of bodybuilding brought about this concept of commercialized training. What does that mean? Well, you go to a place that has equipment and you pay them a fee monthly to use that equipment on your own. And the second wave of fitness was this group training thing. Soul Cycle happens, CrossFit happens, etc. And what it did was it extracted the utility of a collective experience, right? People are sort of held to higher accountability. They're able to do more work over time because they're involved in this group environment, etc. And this like third wave of fitness is sort of yet to be determined, right? And I think that there's going to be a couple of things are going to happen. There's going to be a lot of attrition in terms of the business side. So in that second wave of fitness, almost anyone who opened a functional fitness group training like experience in a big enough market between the years 2009 and 2014 probably had to do very few things right or well to be successful. And now we're seeing attrition that has been expedited by the global pandemic. And so I think that there will be fewer participants and a more focused set of winners where everybody could win before. I think that there's going to be the people who can do this well and repeat it are still going to continue to win. But I don't think that the consumer base is necessarily ready for what I'll oversimplify as like, hey, remember what you did with the group? Now you can just do it in your garage and you're going to be just fine, because of the nature of training, which is difficult. I mean, hell, we even see it in a group training environment where people are financially have a ton of skin in the game and they got a coach texting them and emailing them when they forget to show up. They still can't figure out how to do it, and so, I think Peloton's another great example. They have a great user experience and they get people financially committed in a big way with a lot of skin in the game. And then people just realize that I'm a fucking hamster riding this goddamn bike, and there's no playlist on the planet that's going to get me to do this for the next 10 years. And so I really worry about who then could be compliant to an individualized training program. And last thing I'll say on that is I don't necessarily know how it'll play out. I definitely agree with you as to where this is going. I worry about that compliance piece. And then here's maybe my controversial view on personalized programming. I realize that my bias is very much towards group training, not because I love CrossFit or something like that, but it's because I come from a team sport background. And I just know from personal experience that you can achieve, let's call it, people are going to kill me on the internet for saying this. I'm just going to pull a number out of the hat. Let's call it 85 to 90% of genetic potential with very general programming. Extremely simple general training. And the millions and millions of people around the world that are paying for fitness would be blown away. It would exceed all of their, consumer expectations if they could arrive at even 80% of their genetic potential. And so what I perceive is this like error of a margin where people in their minds are going to perceive that they need a program that is taking into account the length of their femur and their astrological sign and whether they're right-handed or left-handed. And they're sitting at a cool 30% of their genetic potential. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me rephrase it. I was not talking about the individual programming. I still very much believe in that location thing, whether it's in a park, whether it's in a gym, where people gather and they train together and they all have the same programming. What I'm saying is people should learn when to push in a workout, when to step back, when to, like, which constraints they should have when they squat. They should learn what their weakness in the squat is. I mean, muscle wise. So that's what I mean with an individual approach. So in our gym, there's like, I don't know, it's 5x5 back squats or 10x5 sandbag squats. Everybody's doing the same movement, but the approach is different because people should learn, okay, what's my deficiency? What's my weakness on the squat? Are my hamstrings firing on the way down? Can I break with my hamstrings? Can I use my whatever, X, Y, and Z on the way up? That's what I'm talking about, individual approach to training. Same programming. And I think now coaching jumps in and be like, okay, we're all doing the same movements, but we're not just throwing the 10 cues in and hoping everybody survives. But it's more like, okay, so what do you feel when you go down? You feel more quads and hamstrings? That's awesome. Let's work on that. So that was my point. I 1000% believe in most people should train in groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with that. And I think that the crux of what you're saying does come down to coaching. Because I think if you sat every gym owner in, let's say, like our little bubble, like the micro gym space, sat them all down, whether they actually believed it or not, but I think the way that they would answer the question is, oh yeah, that's what we do. That right. And I know that you're laughing because you know that that's not what's occurring in those places. So I think the nuance to this is, who then can execute on that? And I think the answer is fewer people than are trying.
I mean, this is not an answer or a solution, but our approach is, or how we teach our new coaches is, okay, we have like a find, stress, use principle. That means you got to find a muscle, you're going to stress it through the movement pattern, which is one torque chain, and then use it as an exercise, which is multiple torque chains. So I think we need some sort of system where we can teach that to people, and stepping away from cues and making people aware of, okay, this muscle should fire when you do this. Where is that muscle? How does it feel? How does that feel when you do a deadlift? How to push off the floor with a deadlift? So stepping a little bit away from like verbal cues and positioning rather than going into teaching, well, literally tension and muscles. I mean, that's what a gym should do, right?
Totally. I mean, it's a framework. I can see that it's a framework, and I can see that it's your framework, and I think it's incredible. I think that there are probably people in weightlifting halls in Iran and powerlifting gyms in Atlanta, Georgia, who have never heard of a positional priority cueing system, and they are changing lives and putting people on podiums, and that's not necessarily bad either, right? It's like, I just think that there is room to hold space for methods and going all in on methods, all the way in, and acknowledge that there are people garnering like as much or more success using methods that are, I don't want to say opposing, but different, all over the world, right? And so I think maybe the balcony view of what you're saying could be that it's probably ineffective to garner positive adaptation for general populations in a gym without a method to your madness, right? Without a structure to filter for imbalances, drive change, create adaptation. And I just so happen to have enough awareness around the methods that you guys use to respect them and know a little bit about them. And I would imagine that there are people that are getting people plenty strong that have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think we just like a gym, a coach needs a structure, and needs to understand that structure and needs to be able to coach and teach that structure, whatever it looks like. And if it's working, it's working. So, I mean, if it's working, you don't have to fix it.
Yeah.
And we just happen to be on one side of the arch and somebody else is on the other side of the arch. And if both sides are helping people, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into coaching and how you educate your coaches. Like, let's start with what's missing. Maybe not in your gym, but generally speaking, what do you see, like, coaching education wise? What's missing for you? What's your take on it?
Well, I think that the first place for me to start with this is immediately acknowledging that coaching, in order to improve it, would need to be defined, right? And again, I can tell you, how we define excellent coaching from a place that says, uh, this is where we're writing in our own Webster's dictionary what the definition is, and that it's not even claiming to say that this is what's true everywhere in the world. But what I know is that if you don't define something, then it's I don't want to say you can't improve it, but it is much more difficult, and it becomes improving it with specificity nearly impossible, right? And so we try to create a model that brings objectivity to what coaching is, where it can be quite subjective. And part of that definition is acknowledging coaching beyond the technical aspects of coaching. And the reason why I think that that's critically important, specifically in this era, meaning like this time frame, 2022, is that we have more people, like, at an order of magnitude than ever, who have incredible technical knowledge of training. You know what I mean? Like, name your favorite Super Bowl champion, World Series champion, NBA Finals champion, World Cup champion teams from the last 20 years. And like, those strength coaches fucking didn't know shit about anything compared to what a lot of people know today, right? And so on some level, what I'm trying to do is, and this is again from a private sector business perspective, trying to create a definition of coaching that is inclusive of the parts of coaching that would lend to a successful business and successful relationships beyond textbook knowledge, I should say, that includes but transcends textbook knowledge of technical movement, etc. Right? And so our coaches development program is very much a rite of passage and a endless continued development course that is much less married to the technical aspects of coaching, right? It's like, you got to be able to do the job, and that is necessary, but not sufficient to do the job. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's about us coaches having the ability to create a connection with people, right? And with different sorts of people, whether we're in front of a stressed out lawyer, whether we're in front of like a super laid back artist, whether somebody needs to train in the morning and needs to be fired up for like the first meeting, or somebody wants to chill out at night because she or he had a stressful day. I think that's a very overlooked portion of coaching. And I would agree with you on that. Like, again, you need some sort of framework, some sort of model for teaching movement and finding muscles and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's like, most people will remember you because you've been a good person, because you could connect to them, you could understand when to push, when to step back in a training session. And that's very hard to teach because it's about psychology, it's about whatever, it's like neuroscience, it's about so much more comes into coaching than just explaining how to do a squat properly, which is, I mean, compared to psychology, fairly easy.
For sure. And I think, though, when you acknowledge it, like sort of like you just did, and put language to something, then whoever is in the room, so to speak, they can't unknow that, right? And so now you're creating a model or a target for what is the goal that is more universally understood,
Hmm.
right? If you don't make explicit what your organization is calling excellent coaching, then it's uh, you're setting up a situation where everybody's going to have a different definition, right? And so our model works through this like transcend and include thing that I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, in the same way that the Russian dolls work, right? There's like a little one. Okay, so there's five of them. The first three represent the technical element of coaching, and so they include but transcend to the next one. So the first one is the coach's ability to set a standard, right? And so what I mean by that on a macro level would be like the ability to write training
Hmm.
experiences, you know, uh, how many reps, how many sets, what movement plane, what movement load, what goes on the page, so to speak. Setting the standard in a micro context is sort of like put your feet like this, move your hips in this way. It's the standards around the movement, points of performance is maybe what most people would say. A lot of people can do that.
Hmm.
Okay. Uh, Less people can do that and the next step, which is communicating the standard. Meaning, if you're a nerd about movement, but you cannot communicate in an effective, simple, compelling way to people, then that information is stuck in your head and brings no value to the people around you. And so we have very specific definitions around what is better communication than worse communication, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
So we're two Russian dolls in, right? The third is more rare than the people who own the previous two, which is your ability to build towards the standard. Meaning, once we set a standard in a population of people and then communicate that standard to the population of people, the first thing that we know that's going to happen is deviations from the standard, right? And so your ability to build towards the standard is this suite of skills, this like tool belt of skills inside of the coaching arsenal. Whether you want to call it cues, progression, regression, scaling, modification, blah 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 blah, all the on the floor coaching things. And that is the technical part of coaching. But our definition doesn't end there. The the next ability is even rarer. Individuals who hold and own the abilities that I just described technically and can hold their craft into context,
Hmm.
which means, and this is my selfish goal, this is maybe an anecdotal way to describe this part of the Russian doll sequence, is I hope that the coaches in our development course could get on an airplane, fly to Vienna, and observe one of your classes and not um, project their dogma onto you, right?
Hmm.
And they can hold space for potentially different methodologies,
Hmm.
right? It's sort of like the example I use a lot is, my friends at Power Athlete, right? Their standards are around skill transfer in field and court sport training, right? And so one of the physical standards that they hold their movers to is a toe forward squatting position, which is quite controversial. Um, and I can hold space for why that they're coaching that, and that why if we went and visited a world champion weightlifter in China, that individual's toes would be pointed out. And what I'm saying is that if you can hold your craft into context, you wouldn't be the asshole tapping the gold medalist on the shoulder telling him to point his toes forward.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
you know Now, uh, good coaches can do that. They have this technical base and they can hold their craft in context, which is an anti-dogmatic element of our training. The last ring, which in my opinion, are the greatest coaches, are coaches that have this technical mastery, can hold their craft in the context, and are in leadership. And this is the final frontier with regards to our training protocol. And we have a very specific definition of leadership, which is he or she is in leadership when he or she is accountable to the result. So despite your mastery of a process and the things that you've done inside of your control, you own the results, and that is an ownership that transcends blame and diffusion of responsibility and all these other things that show up. Now, it's not a perfect model, but we have a very specific language around that. And then once we have that, we can evaluate people based on these criteria, right? To make a very subjective coaching experience a little bit more, I would say a lot bit more um, specific and objective. And then we can grow it, we can improve it, and to me, that has served us well, and it has sort of no bounds, right? Because each of those parts in the model go on forever, right? There is no like, oh, I mastered chapters 1 through 13. I know all of the anatomy that's listed in this chapter, and I know the torque chains listed in this chapter, and I know all the movement patterns that CrossFit talks about in this chapter. Therefore, I have a black belt in the technical aspect. It's just, that's not how it works, So that's how we perceive it. I would say that our secret weapon is not that there's some sort of like magical education in there. I think it's pretty good, but I don't think it's magic or revolutionary. I think that putting this forward as a rite of passage, meaning in order to be in leadership at Deuce, you have to go through a process that is too long, too hard, too frustrating, too painful to complete it without us all knowing that you'd rather be here than anywhere else.
So do you think that's or what should there be like a bigger coaching education out there? Or do you think this is more of a decentralized education system? So I'll educate my 5 to 50 coaches, you do your 5 to 50 coaches, and other great gyms out to do the same stuff. And then we just send people around, they travel around, they see how other people are coaching, other gym owners are doing their thing in their gym. Or should there be like a general education for coaches?
I don't know. I don't want to be the general education for coaches. So, I don't put a lot of attention and energy there. Like, I'm not a massive advocate for like top-down management and validation. I think that every time someone tries to do that, I observe the same thing that you probably observe, which is that, maybe some of these things are necessary but not sufficient. There's too many examples of experts in all of these different governing bodies that can't demonstrate results to the level that people who don't even know what those certifications are and definitely don't have them can, right? And so, this is like almost a shout out to like what ends up being the hallmark of what I talk about in the summit. But it's just like, any of our troubles today are not for a lack of information.
Oh, for sure not. There's more than enough of information out there, and
we've never been more educated about training.
We should, at least we have all the opportunities to be as well educated as ever, probably.
Right. So that lends me to shy away from saying that there's this need for a centralized place to bless people as real coaches or not real coaches.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so either, because that's now how I quote unquote learned coaching. I just went to gyms that I thought have some value to add to my perspective and my view on movement and training and coaching. Spent a couple of weeks there, did some training sessions, and I've always learned something, no matter what the gym looked like. Whether it was a CrossFit gym, I spent a couple of weeks in CrossFit Invictus in San Diego. I mean, it's a great gym. Not that I want to have the same style or the same structure, but I've learned a lot of stuff, like in terms of organization and just how to handle class management and all that stuff. So I think it's important, and maybe let's sum that up in a question for you. What would you recommend to someone new into coaching, right? So 2 years in the pandemic, people want to change their jobs. They don't want to work for a bank anymore, hopefully. And they want to start a coaching career. So how should they start? And even worse, what if they want to open up a gym? What would you recommend to them?
It's amazing. the first answer is, to the question, how do they start? I'll just regurgitate the advice that I didn't even listen to. That was maybe some of the best advice I got, which is start tomorrow and teach someone anything tomorrow. And the advice I got was, you only need to be one day ahead of your client. And I was like, there's no way that's true. And a lot of ways that can feel like, let's say, like irresponsible advice, right? But if you truly have something to offer and you stay in your lane, I think that you can affect a lot of change with very little knowledge and get practice reps. There's one time in your coaching the impenetrable, ineffective pricing structure that is personal training and your ability to bring value. And that's when you're new, because you need reps and you can't charge $200 an hour, right? Okay. And so you can spend time offering a service that someone otherwise couldn't afford to a sedentary individual and make them a little bit better today than they were the day before, so on and so forth. So start training someone right now. The second answer, and it leans towards like this, starting a business thing, and then also inadvertently the bigger coaching question from part one is, and this is going to be controversial, I think, because it implies judgment. And so here's what I have to say. Find a great model, or I should say, create a great model in your mind about that which you're trying to mimic, right? So it's like, if you're trying to, paint a palm tree and you don't know how to paint, you should at least know what a palm tree looks like, right? Sit in front of one and look at it and make sure it's a real palm tree, and then start practicing mimicking that thing. And then you're going to start and it's going to suck, but at least you're trying to mimic a real palm tree. Okay. And I don't want to sound like the old guy who's like, oh, when I grew up, I had to walk to school uphill both ways in the snow. I'm not that old, and I don't perceive that that was my experience. And we're living in a time right now where, especially in fitness, because it's very aesthetic, that a lot of the inputs and information that people are getting with regards to training are downright misguided, and they're sort of one-sided. You're seeing a lot of information about what it might be like to be a trainer that is specifically not what it's like to be a trainer. Okay. And so back in the day, before like a social media type environment, you would have to meet people and talk to them and experience more of what the total picture really looks like than you can today. And so if you wanted to open a business, there's some nuance to this, but you would need to find businesses that are actually successful in doing the thing. And what's unfortunate is many of the gyms that are favorites and brand name things that people are really striving to be like aren't even financially successful. So now you're trying to mimic a palm tree that isn't even a palm tree. Like, if you were to win and if you were to perfectly execute on your dream to be like X, Y, or Z, which you won't, because you can't perfectly be someone that you're not, right? You could get maybe close. You would become a thing that isn't successful. And that's a tragedy, right? And so I think people need to be very discerning about what the model in their mind is that they are mimicking. And, I think very much with gratitude back on how it was even random that I ended up interning and choosing a mentor that was one of maybe a handful of real businesses that was actually successful as a business. If I landed in literally any other gym in the neighborhood, oh my God, I would have been mimicking a thing that would set me up for failure. So I think that if we're going to make shots on goal, you have to have a good, accurate vision in your mind about what a good shot on goal looks like.
So
and that's
what?
really hard to do.
Yeah. How do you how can you see the difference? Because I know a lot of gyms that are kind of cool on social media, and even if you walk into the gym, like everything's awesome, they're not making money. They're like their athletes are injured all the time. Like how, as a newbie, how do you differentiate between like a surface level shiny gym and somebody that is actually doing the work, no matter how much money they're making, but they're making money, they're helping people? Is it like how long they've been in the business, how you talk to them, how much time they're taking to talk to you? What's the
Yeah.
go ahead.
I think you need to get close to the business, work for free, offer to clean the bathroom, offer to intern, be the best intern in the history of interns. That was my goal when I went into Andy Petronic's gym. I said, I'll be here at 5 in the morning. I'll do whatever you need. I'm going to be the best intern you've ever had in your life. Um, and then when you're there, we're not talking about what's seen on Instagram. You're dealing with real people, how do they live? Can they afford lunch? What's their day look like? What's it like to be, what's the life of a trainer? Oh my God, you're driving where? And then you have to go there after. And I didn't know you had a part-time job too. And then you're working at night in a bar. And wait, what? Right. You're the head coach here and you have two other jobs, right? And it gets really obvious really quick,
Yeah.
And so I think, I'll say it this way. One of my best friends in the world, former teammate, he's brilliant. He's a, MBA graduate, former professional baseball player or whatever. He's like, my goal is to be a general manager in Major League Baseball, which is a really prestigious job or whatever. And I go, dude, you can do anything you want. I know it. You can be president if you want. You can be a Navy SEAL. Anything you want to do, you'll do it. I go, but dude, just make sure you know what it's like to be a
Mm.
general manager, because I think we have ideas about what these things are, but like figure out what that is. Are you on a plane every day? Is it, I don't know. And so I think that those are the kinds of questions you'd need to ask. Like if you admire a trainer, you should shadow them for a day or a week or a month or a year, and you'll quickly learn.
I've asked this question so many times, and 99 out of 100 answers is exactly yours, which is so fascinating because, I mean, that's how I did it. I mean, I opened up the gym, had no clue what to do, and then I started interning while running a gym, which is probably the most not a very smart idea to do it that way. Whatever, but I think that's such an overlooked part of learning your craft, whether that's plumbing, whether that's being a carpenter, whether it's being a coach, whether it's a general manager in baseball. It's like you gotta step in and like have skin in the game and work for free for some time, right? And that concept seems so ridiculous nowadays. Like everybody needs to make like 5 grand on the first day, starting as a coach and has a social media account and a website and shirts and everything. It's like, but you got to put in some time and just like shadow and observe people, right? Why is that concept so? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe because there's so much information out there, because you have the perception that you know a lot, but I always test my coaches. So when I ask them, so when they get cocky, right? When they get cocky, be like, okay, I know everything and I can fix the shoulder and the hip and I can teach you a 200 kilo back squat in like 3 days. I was like, all right, sit down, take an empty sheet of paper and write down everything you know about the squat, everything you would program for that person. And most of the time, there's like 2 sentences on it, and then that's stop.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think the difference between your perception of what you're knowing and what you're actually knowing, plus doing and executing, it's not holding people back, but it's just it's that's the reality.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I when I think about like as an entrepreneur, it's very obvious to you that you are in the business of creating value, and I think that the trouble with being a coach, this is going to sound judgmental, but I think it's worth saying. The distance between a coach at a gym and the owner of that gym might be 2 inches because we stand next to each other all day. but the distance between those two responsibilities is miles apart. Until you write checks and provide opportunities for other people, you're not even in the same neighborhood in terms of responsibility to outcomes and being able to execute and all that. And so I think there's some disillusionment there. There is a certain humility that comes with stepping into that role. So it isn't that weird actually that you opened a gym and probably emptied your bank account to do it and was willing to be an intern at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
because those two things in my mind are very much the same. But to walk into a place and say I want $5,000 and this, that, and the other thing on day zero is not rare. If you talk about creating value is generally rare. So the rare thing to do would be, I'm going to come here and demonstrate to you how it would be impossible for any logical person to not hire me,
Mm-hmm.
and watch me go. But people don't do that.
Yeah. Can you go back to like your first couple of months and maybe years of owning Deuce Gym and just literally tell people out loud, how many hours did you coach? How many hours did you work a week? How many hours did you work a month to kind of get it started? Because I think, again, the perception here is, all right, I'll do like 20 group classes a week and maybe 5 more hours of administration work, and that's about it. So it's 25 hours a week. It's not that hard. I can do that. I can pull that off. It's at least less hours than in my 9-to-5 job in an office. So reflect on that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say without sounding just over the top, but there isn't a difference between time and time working. It's like, it's all of it. You coach, the morning classes and then the midday classes, and then you coach a specialty course at night. And meanwhile, every marketing email and every post and every image and every video that's made is somehow made in between. And if you needed to get a workout in, but it got cut short because someone walked in, it got cut short.
Yeah.
And people got a lot of boundaries today. You know what I'm saying? And that's great. We all need them. Shit, I need them too. But the entity that people enjoy today was not built on a negotiation with myself about my salary. And every day was a like endless marathon of being in the same outfit, and from 5:30 in the morning to 7:30 at night, and you do every job. Later, all the people in the company have more distinct centralized roles, but you did every job, and you did every job like your life depended on it, because it did. And I think the best you can do is try to remind people that, we're lucky to not have to be in that place again. I think the thing that I communicate a lot to the team is, if I'm just being honest, is I go, our biggest liability, our biggest problem is that we're successful. And if we're not careful, we will forget the sort of ruthless mentality that built this place, because as the years go on, I mean, we're in our, our 11th year, starting our 12th year. And almost no one who works with us was here in the beginning, which is fine. And, let's not get it twisted. This was built on a ridiculous psychopathic work ethic that no one here has experienced, and that's fine, but let's not pretend it was something else.
Yeah. I think that's very important to point it out. It's not having a little bit of money or more money, or you find investors to open up a boutique gym and then you hire a head coach and all of a sudden you're on vacation on an island for the majority of the year, and you're just counting money and hoping people stay alive in your gym. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time, but two final questions. It's kind of personal questions. If you mind answering them, just go ahead.
Yeah.
The first one is, would you do something else if you had infinite money? Or let me rephrase it. What would you do if you had infinite amount of money?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I am doing other things, so I think the answer is yes. I have a digital creative agency. I do consulting, and a lot of how I make my living, I guess, my job is on continued education. So in business and in coaching,
Mm-hmm.
and the Hold to Standard Summit. So 100%, I would do other things. I think that uh, I definitely don't regret or would take back opening the gym or building Deuce or anything like that. I do think though that it's fun to run a mental experiment of looking back in time, knowing what I know now. In my book, I mentioned this concept called the hiding hand principle, which is basically that we benefit from not knowing how difficult things will be, right? And so our perception of how difficult a journey will be is generally inaccurate, and it's inaccurate towards it being easier than it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you begin and you start gathering more information, you're too far in to quit. So you kind of keep going into a pursuit that you never would have started in the first place. And so when people start a difficult road like starting a business, you don't have the benefit of knowing it will work. So in this mental experiment for myself, I have the benefit of knowing that it will be successful, like beyond any perception I could have had. With that knowledge, I think about often if I could go back to day zero in the park and start this again, knowing what I know now. And I don't necessarily know the answer, but I do know that it makes me want to throw up,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so I definitely, I definitely would do other things, and I will do other things because thankfully I've built Deuce in a way that doesn't need me to be the beautiful thing that it is. But I'm very interested in design, very interested in real estate. I think that I'd like to explore both of those things together and creating remarkable experiences. I think that I have an interest in communicating what I know about group dynamics
Mm-hmm.
and developmentally oriented organizations to teach that and communicate that to people outside of our industry.
Mm-hmm. And the last one, I mean, it's a big one. It's not an obvious question, but like if you had to answer like the meaning of life question, and you don't have like go any route you want, but what's that for you? It could be purpose of life, meaning of life. What does that mean for you, to you? Just the first thought that comes to your head.
Yeah, I got it because I think about this a lot. So my perception is this, and it actually reflects the model of what we say when we say hold the standard, right? So the standard is just our word for idealism or perfection or the highest version of oneself, etc. And what we say when we say hold the standard is not that we are perfect or like I am the model. That's not what it means. Rather, it is a call to action of our definition of leadership because the standard is this idealistic point above where we are. And in reality, all people are living some sort of reality that is underneath, not quite yet realized, etc. And then to be in leadership, based on the definition I gave earlier, or to quote unquote hold the standard, rather is saying, I will be responsible for this space in between perfection and where I am today. And I think if you look at religions from Christianity and beyond, I'm not super religious. You look at the model that I just described, I think the meaning of life is to attempt idealism, the highest expression of self, as if it's possible, fail, and embody the discomfort and lessons and awareness inside of the space between where you landed and where you tried to go and try it again.
Mm-hmm.
And that any lesson, evolution, growth, self-awareness, richness of life is found in that space between the two. And I think the beauty in that is that it's a relative burden for all people, and it is not dependent on any discipline. You know, these are all just vehicles. I used to play baseball. Baseball is a vehicle. Baseball doesn't matter. It's not an important thing. Neither is fitness, neither is entrepreneurship, but they all are great vehicles to explore that.
Hmm.
And I think that's a very unifying, enriching way to live life. And I think this is my perception. To do anything other than strive for that and fail and have the courage to try again and do it better is a cowardly waste of our time on this planet.
Hmm. So you would say it's more like well, it's getting better every day, obviously, but finding different outlets for exploring yourself, of finding where your little like well, not blind spots, but maybe your weaknesses are, whether it's in communicating externally, internally, whether it's running a business, whether it's being a CEO, whether it's being just an employee of maybe a bigger company, or just owning an agency or owning a company with somebody else. So you think that the growth is in that space, in that room?
Yeah, it's built into it. You know, it's like finding these edges because it's built into the model. Because if you attempted something and nailed it, if you nailed perfection, we know one thing is for sure, that it wasn't a challenge and it isn't a growth area for
Hmm.
you, right? And so the reason why things like sport and entrepreneurship and other difficult craft mastery type tasks have that built-in evolutionary thing is that it puts us in a place to try something that is extremely difficult with our best effort, and that invites that space that I'm sort of talking about. And I don't think you would ever meet yourself or understand yourself or have any self-awareness if you weren't engaged in those types of pursuits. You know, if you stand in front of the basketball hoop and you're on a ladder and you're just dropping balls in the hoop, not only is this a boring, unfulfilling use of your time, you're not learning anything about yourself or the game of basketball. You have to move back a few steps, and then when you make 100 free throws in a row, then you move back a few steps from there. And this is all things can be treated in this way.
Hmm. Hmm. Got it. So it's more
Yeah.
like providing, almost like providing yourself with self-inflicted challenges, but
Mm-hmm.
you're voluntarily willing to take on, right? So for me,
100%.
that's a big distinction. Just being forced or forcing yourself to kind of, I don't know, jump out of a plane or open up a business, rather than you're scared, but you're voluntarily deciding, like internally, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I know it's gonna suck. I know it's not gonna feel good, but not gonna push through it. But I'm gonna be conscious about the process and what comes along the way, and maybe I'll learn something in that process.
100%. And the the sort of importance in that, in my opinion, is also agency because you are choosing it. It is a lie to believe that if you didn't actively pursue those types of challenges, that you would live a safe, unchallenged life.
Hmm.
Because life will deliver those to you, whether you are seeking them or not. And that can feel like a victim-based reality,
Hmm.
the reality that isn't very fulfilling. The way I like to say it is like if you only grow when something happens to you tragically, I guess you got to wait around for your own development. We can do this on purpose.
Yeah, I heard a perfect analogy for that. It's so you're living inside of your house, the zombies are out there, and you're just pulling down the sheets and just pretending they're not coming, and then like they're knocking on the door, and you know exactly what's gonna happen next. And everybody knows how zombie movies end, for the most part.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
Rather than stepping out and be like, okay, maybe I'll fight my way through or not, who knows, but at least like I made an active step in a direction, whatever the outcome is.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. It's impossible to feel the emotion of happiness and be a victim at the same time, chemically in the brain, right? And so even if there is almost nothing in your control, 10,000 zombies, you're definitely going to die. There is agency in stepping through the front door, right?
Yeah, and at least the last step or the last decision I took was an active one.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just being run over. All right, Logan, thank you so much for time. I know time is precious for you as well. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. So
thank you.
Thank you again. Any project, any social media handle, any website you wanna mention to my billions of listeners?
Yeah, the millions of followers around. Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Functional Coach. All of the online education things, including the Hold the Standard Summit, is now going to be offered as a digital course as well. Is at deucegym.com/university. And there's some courses on there. There's some free things. There's some things that cost money, whatever. But yeah, check it out.
Cool. Thank you so much. Appreciate talking to you. And let's stay in touch.
All right. It's good to see your face. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
All right. Bye.